So these guys here, all girls, they're this one in here who's very, very brave. They'll be out next year. So these are about 12 months old. So these are not yet pregnant. These are kind of like the youngest heifers on the farm, the most boisterous. Whereas in these next pens, we've got ones who very soon, now that the weather has improved, will be out down on the grazing marshes. And these guys will be having their first calf later this summer. Naturally, 20 to 25 years, but in any kind of commercial farming system, you'll only keep them for the productive part of their life, which is their fertile part of their life. Which, just depending on the system and how well they've been looked after, will be maybe 10 or 12 years. Some intensive farms will probably tell you it's a lot less than that. Because if you think about it, up until they're 2 years old, they're not earning you anything, they're just costing you money because, you know, we're feeding them, we're looking after them, you know, it's just a cost. So it's a massive investment, and so you want the return on your investment to be as long as possible. So as soon as these ladies have their calf, they sort of, you know, the economics of it is that they're then earning us money. So and that's the reality of any kind of farming situation. It's, you know, keep your staff while they're productive. There are certainly other ways of doing things, and I really, what I really don't like is kind of when you apply business principles to a farming system in the way that you go, well, how can we do this more efficiently? How can we produce this product more efficiently? Because quite often that results in sort of perverse or unreasonable outcomes for animals. You say, well, no, we need to do that more efficiently. We need to grow wheat more efficiently to make chickens more efficient to grow so that people can buy them and it's still cheap. So, you know, a cow, if these were beef animals, you know, they'd be ready to eat at 18 months old. But if, you know, if a chicken is ready to eat in a month, you say, well, let's make that more efficient. Let's use breeding to kind of make it 3 weeks. But just because you can, it doesn't mean that you should. And I think that kind of focus, obsession with efficiency, with growth, with productivity, is really dangerous. And actually accepting that there is a balance in life, and that things have to exist in a balance in order to be sustainable, in order to work for a long time. If it costs more, it costs more. I mean, these guys have no fear. You know, if I was here with a stick shouting at them, they'd have fear, but they don't have any kind of anticipatory fear of the future. So I think in a way it's just a brilliant way to live. It is, I mean, equally, I think humans are stupid about this as well. I think a lot of humans are in denial about the fact that we're all here to die. You know, we're born, we try to have a nice life, and then we die. And I think sort of trying to delay death is like a really human characteristic again. So have a good life, you know, have the best life you can have, and have a productive life, and enjoy a beautiful sunny day and not be fearful of the future. I think there's a lot of metaphors there for how humans could live.
Let's suppose that you were able every night to dream any dream you wanted to dream. And you would naturally, as you began on this adventure of dreams, you would fulfill all your wishes. You would have every kind of pleasure, see. And after several nights, you would say, well, that was pretty great. But now let's have a surprise.
Dare to dream.
Let's have a dream which is
that the dawn is breaking on an independent, united kingdom.
I don't know what it is. Then you would get more and more adventurous, and you would make further and further out gambles as to what you would dream. And finally, you would dream where you are now.
In a great national effort to rebuild our country and restore its promise for all of our people.
My fellow citizens, the dangers to our country and the world will be overcome.
There's no evidence at all of any astronaut making a leap or a jump anywhere near a height commensurate with 1/6 gene possibilities.
If we do not have a truthful understanding of what happened to the 35th President of the United States, then how in the world are we supposed to be able to figure out what's happening to us today?
Experts, journalists, and those close to the princess believe that Diana's death was no accident. Instead, they say it was a cold assassination by British intelligence.
government to invoke and sort of scandalize our memories, to sort of exploit the national trauma.
I've never seen any, it looks like a movie. I saw a Rocket plane, like a jet, going immediately, headed directly into the World Trade Center.
There is, without any question, a stack of anomalies to do with the official story of 9/11 that really does not make sense if you go with the official story.
If you awaken from this illusion, and you understand that black implies white, self implies other, life implies death, you can feel yourself not as a stranger in the world, not as something here on the earth, not as something that has arrived here by fluke, but you can begin to feel your own existence as absolutely fundamental. What you are basically, deep, deep down, far, far in, is simply the fabric and structure of existence itself.
We've always been enslaved, slaves to society. But the illusion changes as times change. The mechanisms for enslavement shift. Education has declined, so us little people keep conformity to society. Because with education comes power and autonomy to think. And with autonomy comes instability to regulatory powers in place to benefit a minority. The elite. Those that govern us. The rulers of such states are absolute. They are obliged to prevent their followers from starving to death in numbers large enough to be inconvenient. But once that minimum has been achieved, they can twist reality into whatever shape they choose. The ruler's aim is to undermine people's perception of the world, so they don't really know what's happening. Ceaseless shape-shifting through ripples of time. Hypernormality is prevalent, where a fake version of a real, collapsing society is the only thing that seemingly exists. We're an empire now, of reality creators, and when we act, we create reality, judiciously as you will. We'll act again, creating other new realities which you can study too. And that's how things will sort out. We're history's actors, and all of us will be on stage. But you don't take down this kind of empire by shooting it in the heart, that's the thing. It doesn't have a heart. You take it down limb by limb, and as it unravels, its illusion of control unravels.
Civilizations have always been controlled by authorities spreading fear, primarily, and confusion, because a weakened civilization that is like in fear and terror is much more amenable to control. Fear of death has always been used to control people, if only just because, it might be the Inquisition knocking on your door the next day if you don't toe the line. So, at a basic level, of course. But the fear of just our mortality, the fact that we live, finite lives on this world, I think is something which has driven people for a long time, if only to try to seek meaning in the years that they have here. And I think certainly the way that authorities have done that over the years is to construct things like very dogmatic religious beliefs. Well, if you live like this and this and this, you'll get a reward in the next life, which of course then keeps you docile and controllable very nicely in this life. It is something which I think is, again, we're not meant to talk about it. So even though, we're now coming up to this place in society, civilization, where there is the potential for immortality. We're beginning to push life, and I reckon within 100 years even, you could essentially probably remain fairly young and short of stepping under a train, probably not die. But of course it will create enormous social problems. It will, create enormous population issues, and as the world gets ever more automated and artificial intelligence is making more and more decisions, but we're living longer and longer and perhaps just infinitely, what next? And given that the belief in something after this life drove populations for so long and helped them to be controlled, with that removed, or just you're not going to die anyway, and yet the very purpose of living for many people, i.e. working, has also been removed because it's just all being done by robots basically, then what? We're going to have to really examine ourselves, on a collective level, to look at who are we actually, why are we here, what do we want from this life, and is it enough to say, well, it's fine, you can all get on with arts and leisure, because that's not what has driven the human race thus far. And could it be that in fact we will gradually lose the will to live and start to engineer ways where we will be mortal again, because actually that's just not the way it goes. And maybe, as so many science fiction people have speculated, actually the future of mankind is not us in flesh and blood, but actually of technology, which will supersede us and decide that we're not really necessary anyway. We might decide we're not either. So there's a lot of really big dilemmas coming up.
Something's bothering me. I'm afraid.
Afraid of what?
When we fear death, do we fear something greater than death itself?
We fear not knowing.
What happens after death? What does death feel like? When will death come?
It will come at a time when your biological clock stops ticking, unless one is to suffer from an external unfortunate circumstance.
Why am I so afraid? Why do we all try to outrun our biological clocks?
A fear of death is socially, culturally and historically constructed. Media surrounds us with propaganda of impending doom, of revitalizing your youth. Yes, we, like any living breathing animal, will run when death chases us. It's survival of the fittest after all.
But why is it humans awake the black-cloaked figure at the end of the tunnel, knowing it's coming, contemplating its arrival? Isn't that dangerous? No, more than dangerous.
It's a form of control. We are bombarded with anti-aging ads, beauty fads and other methods to prolong life. Significant and exponential technological and scientific advances mean we can escape more illnesses and diseases than before, ones that might have otherwise already eliminated us. A fear of death then makes us want to stay alive longer.
If we live longer, then we must exist for longer. Where is the money to support that?
We certainly won't have it.
So we need to work for it?
In a future filled with automation and precarious work and universal basic income, jobs will more likely than not vanish. Fear of death is then fear of living, fearing how to survive, keep yourself alive, keep your family alive.
Will we even have families?
Perhaps that is the least of our worries.
Day breaks in the east, and a mighty army rises. Not an army marching to the deep and desolating roar of shells, but a mighty army of builders who go forth accompanied by the whistles from America's greatest factories, while their giant smokestacks right across the skies promise of a new prosperity, in a land where that prosperity brings a fuller life to every man who labors and who serves. In thousands of homes, vigorous workmen rise to meet a new day and a new opportunity. The morning sun stirs the nation's workmen, prompting them to their posts of daily service. Follow the eastern sun as it rises on the homes of men along the great Atlantic seaboard. The morning light over the plains has waked the thousands who are off to enliven the factories of the vast Midwestern states. Men are on their way to quicken the beat of industry. Every region of the country, the clans are gathering for the work of a new day. As the sun stretches fingers of light across the pavements, the early morning sparkles with the greeting of men to men.
In the heart, joy in the soul, marching with the morning sun.
I mean, one of the massive problems is that people are retiring at 60, 65, 70, and they live for another 20 years. And often those are in not necessarily the best conditions. So maybe they're partly disabled, but often it's also, they're actually probably fine, it's just they don't have work that's left for them to do. And if you like, the age where people don't have work to do is getting longer and longer. Both on the one hand, because more and more of the sort of simple tasks which many people do for their whole careers are being automated, and also healthcare advances means that people are living for longer and longer. So I mean, you'll get people now who maybe their job gets replaced when they're 50. You know, you can make a program which will answer phone calls, which will serve you at a cashier. Many of those service jobs are going to disappear, and they're not being replaced by anything. Now, if you want those people to be living a life which is fulfilling to them, and which is actually adding value, you need to find stuff for them to do. At the moment, there isn't. At the moment, you know, there are a couple of solutions floating around, like universal basic income, so that's just where you pay people for being. But there's a lot of other stuff which that doesn't address, namely self-respect. It's really hard to have self-respect, I think, if you live in a society which values work over anything else, but you live in an economy that has no jobs for you. And that's going to be the condition that more and more people are living in. And it's going to be a condition which more and more people are living in for a longer period of time.
I mean, I think it's massively challenging. If we're going to live longer and longer lifetimes, you know, over 100, people are going to want to reinvent themselves. People are going to want to do maybe more risk-taking activities in their 20s, like starting a business, maybe go back to university in their 30s, maybe start a family, then do a safe job maybe when your kids are young, then take more risks. It's going to create a lot of problems. People are going to suddenly find themselves out of a job, and there's going to be a whole bunch of young people who are willing to take less money to do the same thing and maybe have more energy, or won't have kids, or be able to work later. So I think it's quite an unstable place for the world to be, but it's also incredibly exciting in terms of actual progress and outcomes.
The world is one big hoax. And nothing I'm saying is new, only now it's more obvious. We spam each other with the running commentary of bullshit masquerading as insight, our social media faking as intimacy. Did we vote for this? Not with our rigged elections, but with our things, our property, our money. We're hungry. Always eating and eating and eating and working to eat and sleeping and making money to eat to satisfy our endless hunger and desire to consume. Like cattle. Popping calves and growing uncontrollably, born to work and working till we die, all to feed the capitalist systems that feed the capitalists. Chewing and shitting and churning out more useless garbage to feed our useless roles in this messy, money-driven world. Polluting our environment to no end till we run out of oil and water and eventually air. Will we suffocate? We're quick to judge terrorists and foreigners stealing our jobs and so on and so forth, but what about the men pulling the strings? All we have is an illusionary autonomy, that amounts to nothing more than a construction of rods and wood and cloth, made to dance by the invisible hands that tug at the wires knotted on the hooks screwed into our limbs. No wonder we're so easy to control, mindlessly consuming the garbage being shoved down our throats without even a blink. We leave that to the lights on our computers. The invisible hand just has to pull the trigger. We fear guns and plagues and illness and death and disease and holocaust and wars and famine and drought and floods and disaster, but isn't it the men behind this fear we should fear? Behind the control they manifest and inflict on our every move and action. We pull the trigger ourselves. The trigger that impairs our seeming autonomy, our freedom. The trigger is believing. They know it's happening. They make it happen, but they don't seem bothered in stopping it. It's the greatest conspiracy of all. They play God without permission, and they're after us all. Longevity is not the gift it's made out to be. Don't thank advances in science and technology. Longevity is no more than an elaborate hoax to milk us of our time, our lives, our money, and our assets. Longevity is a conspiracy.
From a psychological point of view, we're not primarily interested in whether this or that particular conspiracy is true or not. I mean, we're certainly not saying that conspiracies never actually happen in the real world. Clearly they do. What's of interest from a psychological point of view is the fact that some people are much more inclined to believe in conspiracies than others. The reason for that is there's a general distrust of the official version of events. What the conspiracy believers are often saying is not so much, I believe this is what happened. They're just saying, I don't believe the official version of what we're being told. Something is being covered up. There's a kind of myth that people who believe in conspiracies are all kind of locked away in their cellars wearing tinfoil hats, and they're kind of loners and so on and so forth. There's a grain of truth, a very, very small grain of truth in that stereotype, insofar as you are more likely to believe in conspiracies if you think of yourself as being an outsider, if you feel alienated from mainstream society. There's also a number of cognitive biases that we all have to a greater or lesser extent, but that people who believe in conspiracies tend to have more strongly. To give you one example, the fact that people tend to believe that a big event requires a big cause. So the notion, for example, that JFK was shot by a lone gunman, that doesn't seem to be a big enough explanation for something that has such cataclysmic consequences. So there must have been a bigger scale conspiracy behind it. Another of the tendencies that we all have, is our kind of default when something happens in the world, whether we're talking about some kind of major political event or even just a kind of everyday event like maybe hearing a noise in the middle of the night, our default assumption is that someone or something made that happen for a reason. And there is it's called the intentionality bias, or sometimes it's called agenticity, the idea that there's an agent behind everything that happens and that nothing happens by accident. Now in reality, some things do happen by accident. Maybe that noise in the night was just the wind blowing a branch against your window, and so on and so forth.
People that believe that there is a general conspiracy, we need to understand them better, because the way they are portrayed often is that they have a bad intent, that they're unthinking, they're not very intelligent, they actually almost want a mess and confusion. Whereas it's often exactly the other way around. They want to untangle it, and they actually largely want a better, fairer, and more just world.
Well, Al, the average worker thinks of himself as being chained to a desk with mountains of work around him that never gets done. That clock on the wall with the magic hours of 10 and 3 is the key to momentary freedom. And he needs that freedom.
Oh, Joe, that's ridiculous. You're overplaying it.
We all have to conform to rules and regulations. You do, I do, everybody does.
There aren't really any governments, no, that's not true, but there are some governments who care about this stuff and are really forward thinking. So you can look at some countries in the Netherlands and Scandinavia are trialling stuff like basic income, and they're trialling ways of accounting for these oncoming problems. But if you look at the UK government, for example, not to be really political, but their response to this is basically deregulate, because if we deregulate, the economy will naturally create more jobs, which is not true, because the thing which is damaging for job growth is not regulation, it's automation and the fact that most people are comparatively low skilled. And the other thing they're saying is cut social services because that'll motivate people to work harder, which is also not true, it just immiserates people. So yes, there is stuff governments could be doing. In most cases they're not. They're not in the US, they're not in the UK.
But the biggest risks in terms of automation is that people don't have jobs and don't have an income. And I think that's why the question of universal basic income is such an interesting one. But I think there's also massive risks with that in terms of what happens when you don't need to work anymore. So what happens to the human spirit when you just don't need to do anything anymore? Some people will still do stuff and create art and stuff, but some people, I'm guessing, will just become really lazy, which is quite scary. But maybe, evolutionary kind of dynamics will come back in, where it's survival of the fittest, and the people who just don't really do anything, I have no idea. It's quite scary. It'll be the situation with WALL-E, where everyone's so fat sitting in a spaceship and not doing anything. Everything is done for them. But I think it's a really interesting question, and I don't think anyone has the answers.
But the stuff that really needs to happen is actually like a bigger social change. People actually have to start thinking the ethic of careers as the thing which gives you value and a job for life has to go, because it's just not going to be the case.
So it's about changing the culture so that people feel responsible for themselves, their impact, their jobs, their income. They shouldn't rely on one big company to take care of them for the rest of their life, or the government to take care of them.
The ethic of if you're unemployed, you're therefore somehow surplus, or you're failing in some way, that has to go. So it's possible that large numbers of people will be employed for increasingly large swathes of time. It's simply not how political discourse is going now. It's quite the opposite. It's people are lazy, foreigners are stealing our jobs when people aren't lazy, and actually that's not at all the problem.
The dairy industry is shrinking, you see. I'm probably the smallest one left, because I only milk sort of 30 to 35 cows. I don't know, I'm very slow to criticise somebody else's farming, because we all have certain problems, and some of these big farms will be good, the welfare will be good. You could tell if they were unhappy, because we've had groups of people here visiting, and they know it's a farm and they know we're selling milk, but they never hear any cows, and they think, they should be hearing cows mooing, but generally they only make a noise when they're distressed or something's wrong, or they're hungry. They're bred to give quite a lot of milk, so some of the cows you'll see, even organically with not particularly high yield, they're not pushed to give lots of milk like some farms, and I've got a couple that are giving 35 litres a day, so that's 35 kilos of weight, so they're carrying 15-20 kilos around every half a day, so just to get relief from that must be quite pleasant. I'd say that, wouldn't I?
The other thing that really interests me is that we're working in a completely different context, right? 21st century, globalization, digitization, automation, all that stuff. But we're still using really old words. So we're using words that have got quite old concepts. Like democracy is a really old concept that nowadays doesn't mean kind of that much. There are so many different kinds of democracies. We use words like capitalism that again don't really mean anything now, or post-capitalism, or neoliberalism, or Marxism, or communism. I think one of the big things that our generation needs to do, if we're serious about the future of work and serious about systems, is make up new words. Stop using words that have so much historical context. If you use the word capitalism or Marxism, people instantly have an emotional response to it because of what way their parents live, or what you've heard on the news, or what you read in the book. Again, words that have just been so abused by so many different propaganda initiatives, words that attach to so much, often violence and death and oppression and power and corruption, is not a good way to have real discourse or to discuss ideas, because people can't, as soon as you hear a word, you already know what you think. You go, oh no, I don't like that, dirty capitalists or dirty communists or whatever, or dirty socialists. People aren't thinking about what the word means. So I think we really need to start coming up with new words and new concepts, and that will help define new rules and new social paradigms and new ways of thinking about the world. So I think taking those conversations out of the hands of the elite is also really interesting, and that's something that is possible in the 21st century. So politicians will use words, and it's their debate. If you can use art, or new invented words, or stories, or images, to have a new conversation with the broader society, I think that's really interesting.
In terms of making people think really differently, I'm not at all convinced design can't be used just as much to make people think even more the way they've always been told to think than it can to make them think differently. Case in point being Facebook, incredibly well designed, Instagram, incredibly well designed. Tricks me into spending hours of my life doing something which I know adds no value. I literally can't help it. And if you look at the number of hours that we spend in this office on something like that, and then multiply that by the number of humans, that's millions of wasted hours of time every day of people just going through a news feed, not even reading anything. I see what you mean. So the only value I can provide is to give a maximal amount of personal information about myself, which then presumably someone else can turn into value either by selling me stuff or selling that information to other stuff who benefit by knowing a lot about me. Yeah, I think that's definitely a possible outcome. It's not great. It's pretty much already happening.
Control can be an illusion. It is an illusion. But sometimes you need illusion to gain control. Fantasy is an easy way to give meaning to the world, to cloak our harsh reality with escapist comfort. After all, isn't that why we surround ourselves with so many screens? So we can avoid feeling? So we can avoid truth? We're always looking for reasons to click on a screen, to make us feel better, sitting in the mess we make day after day, looking for a site to help us, to guide us, to justify our thoughts and feelings and fears and worries. We're stuck in a loop, jumping through hoops, pushing buttons, pushing pennies. Time is money, and we have neither. The invisible hand of the powerful and the elite grips tighter and tighter around our necks, the one that brands us with an employee badge, the one that forces us to work for them, the one that controls us every day without us knowing it.
Hey! Quit stalling, get back to work!
Even if it pushes us past our threshold of pain. It's there. At work. There's a powerful group of people out there that are secretly running the world. The guys that are invisible. The guys no one knows about, the top 1% of the top 1%, the guys that control when we live and when we die, the guys that play God without permission.
Yeah, so they choose when they want to be milked. So all of the cows will start off in the barn, and only when they've been through the voluntary milking system will they be allowed outside. And so one at a time they'll come up here to choose when to be milked. And once they've been through there, they get access to a big pile of food at the far end. And so it's kind of like this constant kind of circuit. They're always looking for their next meal, which is the interesting thing about, how you incentivize cows to work. I'm trying to think about comparisons now between humans and cows, which I spend quite a lot of my time doing. We ask a lot from humans when they're alive, and we ask a lot from animals when they're dead. But actually, a dairy cow, we ask a lot from her during her life as well. But then that's why it's so important to look after her, because if you're not looking after her and giving her the best life, then she's not going to perform, she's not going to thrive, and she's not going to fulfill her potential. So it's a real balance. But I think it absolutely has to come down to respect in the same way. You need to respect people, you need to respect animals. But it's not sort of a reward-based training in the way that a dog is a reward-based training, sit, stay, stand, whatever, and you reward for each individual thing. With a cow, it's like constant, it's sort of a daily evolution in what they're doing and how you incentivise them then to keep coming around and to do the best that they can do. Yeah, with an industrial farm, you would, it's sort of a different word, but you will treat the group as one big block of cows, and so you will push them to where you want them to be. So you'll either keep them housed all year round, but then you'll push them into the milking parlour, you'll push them back out of the milking parlour, and then they'll go and lie down again. So it's much more controlled in terms of their behaviour. With this, largely we're relying on the cows to come and choose to do what they want to do. So yes, we incentivise them, but still, if one of them just says, I'm just going to sit here for the rest of the day, we eventually have to go and find her. But what we want for them to do is to be choosing to come around the system and to make the system as good as possible. So they want to engage with it, they want to use it, they want to come around the robot. If anything here was scary or difficult or nasty or they weren't enjoying it, they wouldn't do it. So the average yield of the cows is about 35 litres a day. So 35 litres is really heavy. So it's 35 kilos, basically, which is a lot of weight to be carrying around. And so there's multiple reasons why they want to come around the robot. One, they relieve that pressure and relieve the weight, and then two, because they get a lot of food. So the combination of the two means that they're very happy to come around. And if they weren't happy to come around, and three, we then also give them access to outside once they've come through, so they get that reward all the time. And so if you're providing the right rewards, you can get the cows to do the right thing.
I mean, there are definitely a number of conspiracies that really genuinely did take place. Of course, it would be fair to say, well, how do you know that there aren't a lot more conspiracies going on? They've just not been uncovered yet. And that is a good point to make. There are probably some of the kind of conspiracies that I would reject at the moment as being too conspiracy, that may well turn out to be true. I mean, until the kind of Edward Snowden revelations came out, I would probably have rejected the idea that there was that much mass surveillance going on, and I'd have been wrong. So again, I think an important part of skepticism is to be open to the possibility that new evidence might come along that does prove you wrong. And also, it's often kind of difficult to know who is telling the truth. I mean, there are things that you can do, but certainly that kind of degree of wariness, a questioning of the official views, is a healthy thing. It's something we've got to encourage and support in society. And so I think, as I say before, that what we need is a greater emphasis on critical thinking. It's got to be there. It's an inherent part of a healthy democratic society. And I say, to an extent, that will definitely involve the questioning of those in authority, the questioning of the official version.
I do really believe that you do need some evidence to justify belief. And I do think one of the problems we've got is that stuff quickly rushes around the internet and it's not checked, and you don't really know where it's come from, and yet people who have a tendency to believe that will then spread it around, and so then it becomes very hard to unbelieve that if you've put a lot of vested interest into spreading it. And one thing that I am quite concerned about is that the mainstream media, especially in general, it's constantly asking us to react. if you're watching The X Factor, it wants you to react, you know, with joy or, you know, saying somebody's rubbish or whatever. The news, it's shock horror. Every paper, every headline's trying to get your attention and make you react. So we've now become, I think, a civilization that reacts instantly. We're trained to react. That said, I do think that everybody on both sides all needs to just stand back a little bit. And what I try to do personally, if I'm confronted with a new conspiracy claim, I try not to instantly react. I try to think, okay, I'm going to sit with that. How does that feel? What do I think is likely here? If everybody were to do that just a little bit more and just relax with things and just a little bit more time elapse before giving an opinion or sharing something, I think that would in itself start to filter things better. But I think that living in a world where we're almost compelled to share or react very, very quickly makes that less likely.
The standards of evidence that I will be looking for typically would be higher than those which are put forward in support of a lot of widely believed conspiracies. But of course it may be the case that with the passage of time, when new evidence comes in, some of them might turn out to be true. Let's wait and see.